For today's double lesson, what we're going to be looking at is the next two scenes in Macbeth in the first act. Our essential question is different, okay? Remember to write this down in your interactive notebook like we would normally do in class. Titles are important, dates are important, and the use of a red pen is also very important. So, our essential question, why are the early stages of a play important? So why is the beginning of a play or any text important? And our learning objective is to demonstrate an understanding of Act 1 in Macbeth. So, in our previous lessons, we met the Weird Sisters and we met King Duncan and a number of noblemen. We learned about what they believe about Macbeth, and we learned that the three Weird Sisters had something in store for Macbeth himself. So once again, it's important for you to make these notes into your interactive notebook, and the video following this slide will give you more information about Act 1, Scene 3. So in Scene 3, the witches appear before Macbeth and Banquo. Banquo is a dear friend of Macbeth, and it is interesting to see how their relationship changes throughout the text. The three witches, or the three weird sisters, call Macbeth the Thane of Cawdor, and they tell him that he will be king. At this point, Macbeth does not know that he is going to be becoming the Thane of Cawdor, and that Duncan wishes that he shall be granted with this title. So when Macbeth hears these, he does not know what is about to happen. This is known as dramatic irony, because the audience knows more about what's happening in the play to the characters than the actual characters themselves. So they call Macbeth the Thane of Cawdor, and they tell him that one day he will be king. Macbeth is a little bit stunned by this because Macbeth is not an heir to the throne. King Duncan has sons, so rightly so, those sons are the next in line to become king. So when the three witches tell him this, he's a little bit confused and he's a little bit weary of what they have to say. They tell Banquo that his descendants will be king. They tell Banquo that basically his children were going to be king. After this, Macbeth learns from Ross that he is to be made Thane of Cawdor. So after they leave the witches and they walk on, continue back to their homes from the battlefield, they meet Ross, who has been instructed by King Duncan to tell Macbeth that because he was so brave in battle, that he is now the new Thane of Cawdor. This shocks Macbeth because he has just been told by these three witches that this would happen, and now he wonders about maybe becoming king. Macbeth begins to imagine that the witch's prophecy, so a prophecy is something that it's kind of like telling the future, something that will happen in the future, and the witches have been prophesizing about Macbeth's future. So Macbeth begins to imagine that the witch's prophecy may come true and that he will become king. So this idea of becoming king is now in his brain. And what we know about Macbeth is that he is brave, he is fair, he is very, very loyal to his king. But what we don't know is that Macbeth is an extremely ambitious character. And this starts to unfold from here on out. A key quotation here is, "Why do you dress me in borrowed robes?" And this is important because borrowed robes, it's basically, obviously, robes, etc., goes along with what kings and important characters or people would have worn in these times during Shakespearean times. And "why do you dress me in borrowed robes" reflects that borrowed means they belong to somebody else. So these titles, King and Thane of Cawdor, Macbeth believes they belong to somebody else. So when he says this to the three witches, "Why do you dress me in borrowed robes?" he is saying, why are you saying that I will become these things when they belong to somebody else? So that's an important quotation from this scene. More details and information is available here on this video. Again, watch the video, take notes, and make sure that you are documenting this in your interactive notebook. and uploading a picture of your notes to the drive. So today is a double lesson, so we are going to continue working and examining Act 1, Scene 4. So in Act 1, Scene 4, Duncan, who is the king, warmly receives Macbeth and Banquo. So when they return from the battle, they go to see King Duncan. King Duncan names his son, Malcolm, as the heir to the throne. So he announces to everybody that, his son, Malcolm, is going to be the heir to the throne. So if anything were to happen to King Duncan, the next person in line would be Malcolm. Macbeth obviously is thinking about what he has just been told by the three witches, because he says, well, I just became the Thane of Cawdor. Does this mean that I have an opportunity to become king? So when he sees or hears that Malcolm has become the heir to the throne, he starts to see him as an obstacle to his ambition to be king. And this is where we start to see the ambitious side of Macbeth. And unfortunately, it is Macbeth's ambition which leads to his downfall. Duncan honours Macbeth by announcing a visit to Macbeth's castle in Inverness. So Duncan is again the king who we met in Act 1, Scene 2, discusses how he is going to visit Macbeth's castle as a mark of respect for the fight that he put up against the previous Thane of Cawdor's army. And he is very, very happy to go and visit Macbeth's family and his castle so that they can celebrate Macbeth's new title and the win in battle. Macbeth says he will ride ahead and tell his wife about Duncan's visit so that they can prepare the castle for the king's visit. A very important quotation here is, "Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. The eye wink at the hand." So this is important because we know that Macbeth's black and deep desires are that he becomes king. And in this instance, we know that he sees Malcolm as a threat, Duncan is the king, and that's where Macbeth wants to be. He wants to be the king. So when he says, "Stars, hide your fires," what he is basically saying is that he believes those stars to be the greater gods, and he asks them to look away as he thinks about this deep and, I suppose, wrong desire to become king because he is not rightly an heir to the throne. That's a very, very important quotation here for Act 1, Scene 4, and we will discuss that a little bit later on when we are talking about the quotations. So once you're finished with this, again, there's a video that you can watch and you can gain more information documented in your interactive notebook and then push on. And the task that you need to complete today is the comprehension check for scenes 1 to 4 on Google Classroom. So that is your task 2 on Google Classroom for today's lesson. Finally, for the boys, that's all you need to know. Okay, so you can continue working. But for the girls, you will need to work off this. Okay, the boys have already started, so what they will need to do is just add the newest two quotations to their grid. Whereas the girls, you will need to draw this into your interactive notebooks, or you can print it out. Your title is going to be Important Quotations. In here, you will have Act 1, and then in these boxes, you will put Scene 1, Scene 2, Scene 3, Scene 4, Scene 5 and 6, and Scene 7. What you're going to do is go back over your notes, get the key quotations that I've included on every single slide, and pop the key quotation into these boxes. Okay, so by the end of our examination of Act 1, you will have a key quotation to represent each and every scene. Very, very important. So once that is done, make sure you take a picture of your notes and you upload it into your Google Drive. Take a picture of your graphic organizer and you can pop it into your assignments box. And as we continue to go through the lessons, I will be marking your efforts in Google Drive and in Google Classroom, and I will be letting you know on your progress.